One comment would turn a simple interview into the most shocking meltdown in talk show history. The studio lights were blazing hot that evening. Bill Maher sat behind his desk with that signature smirk, the one that told his audience they were in for something good. Across from him sat Meghan Markle, dressed in an outfit that probably cost more than most people make in a month. She had that look on her face, the one that said she was doing everyone a favor just by being there. Bill started things off friendly enough. "So, thanks for coming on the show tonight. I know you've been pretty selective about where you make appearances these days." Meghan smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, I only go where I feel I can have real, meaningful conversations." "Right, meaningful," Bill said, leaning back in his chair. "So let's have one of those. You've been pretty vocal about your struggles with the press, with the royal family, with basically everyone who's ever questioned anything you've done. When does personal accountability come into play?" The audience went quiet. You could feel the temperature in the room drop about 10 degrees. Meghan's smile faded fast. "I'm sorry, are you seriously suggesting that I'm somehow responsible for the way I've been treated?" "I'm suggesting that maybe, just maybe, not everything is everyone else's fault," Bill replied calmly. "You've had conflicts with your family, with your husband's family, with the British press, with the American press, with your own staff. At some point, doesn't the common denominator become you?" Meghan sat up straighter, her jaw tightening. "That is incredibly offensive. You have no idea what I've been through." "I have some idea," Bill said. "You've told us many, many times. On Oprah, in your Netflix series, in interviews, in podcasts. The whole world knows your story at this point. And clearly the whole world includes people like you who simply refuse to believe a woman when she talks about her experiences." Meghan shot back, her voice rising. Bill held up his hands. "I didn't say I don't believe you. I'm saying that maybe the constant victim narrative gets a little tiresome. You married a prince. You lived in a palace. You now live in a mansion in California. You have millions of dollars. At what point do you acknowledge that maybe your life isn't the hardest life that's ever been lived?" The audience started to murmur. Some people were nodding. Others looked uncomfortable. Meghan's face was turning red. "You have absolutely no right to minimize my trauma. The racism I faced, the mental health struggles, the lack of support, all of that was real." "I'm not saying it wasn't real," Bill countered. "I'm saying that you also have resources and privileges that most people who face those same issues don't have. You could have left quietly. You could have handled things privately. Instead, you turned your family drama into a multi-million-dollar media empire, and now you're upset that people are asking questions about it? Those questions come from a place of misogyny and racism," Meghan said firmly. Bill shook his head. "See, that's the problem. You can't just label everyone who disagrees with you as racist or sexist. That's not how this works. Some people just think you're wrong. Some people think you've handled things poorly, and that's allowed. That's called living in a free society. A free society that protects white men like you while tearing down women of color like me," Meghan snapped. "Oh, here we go," Bill said with a laugh. "White men like me. You know what? I've worked my entire life to get where I am. I didn't marry into success. I built it. And along the way, I've been criticized, attacked, and called every name in the book. But I don't sit around making Netflix documentaries about how hard my life is." Meghan stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is exactly the kind of treatment I was talking about. You invite me here under the pretense of a real conversation, and instead you ambush me with your misogynistic talking points." "Sit down," Bill said, not rudely but firmly. "We're having a conversation. This is what conversations look like. They're not just people agreeing with you and telling you how brave you are. I don't have to sit here and take this," Meghan said, her voice shaking with anger. "Actually, you kinda do," Bill replied. "You agreed to come on the show. You knew what kind of show this is. I asked tough questions. That's literally my job. If you wanted someone to just fawn over you for an hour, you should have gone on Ellen." "How dare you," Meghan said, pointing her finger at him. "You think you're so clever, so funny, making jokes while you completely dismiss the serious issues I'm trying to discuss." Bill leaned forward on his desk. "What serious issues? You keep talking about serious issues, but all I hear is you complaining about your in-laws and how mean the newspapers were to you. There are actual serious issues in the world. People are struggling to pay rent. They're dealing with real discrimination that affects their ability to get jobs, to get housing, to stay alive. And you're upset because a tabloid said you made Kate cry. The audience gasped. A few people even started clapping. Meghan's hands were shaking. You are a disgusting human being. You sit here in your privileged position, on your little show, judging everyone else while contributing nothing of value to society. Contributing nothing? Bill said, raising his eyebrows. I've been on television for decades having actual important conversations about politics, religion, social issues. What have you contributed? A podcast that got canceled? A children's book? A couple of Instagram posts about compassion? I have used my platform to speak truth to power, Meghan said loudly. Bill laughed out loud at that. You are power. You're worth millions of dollars. You have direct access to media outlets around the world. You're not some revolutionary speaking truth to power. You're a wealthy celebrity who's mad that not everyone likes her. I came here tonight hoping for an intelligent discussion, Meghan said, her voice cold. Clearly, that was a mistake. You're nothing but a bully with a microphone. And you're nothing but a narcissist with a crown complex, Bill fired back. You want to be treated like royalty while also playing the victim. You can't have it both ways. Meghan grabbed her purse from beside her chair. I'm done here. Of course you are, Bill said, because when someone challenges you, you run away. That's what you do. You ran away from your family. You ran away from the royal family. And now you're running away from this conversation because you can't handle anyone disagreeing with you. You know what your problem is? Meghan said, turning to face him fully. You're so desperate to be relevant that you'll say anything, attack anyone just to get attention. You're a sad, bitter old man who peaked 20 years ago. The audience went completely silent. Even Bill looked a little surprised at that one, but he recovered quickly. At least I peaked? What have you done besides marry well? Seriously, what actual accomplishment can you point to that isn't directly tied to who you married? Meghan's face was bright red now. I was a working actress. You were on a cable show that most people never watched, Bill said. Let's be honest about what your career was before you met Harry. You were nobody special. And that's fine. Most actors aren't special. But then you got lucky. You met a prince. And suddenly you think you're the most important person in the world. I think I'm important because I'm trying to make a difference, Meghan said. By doing what exactly? Bill asked. Giving speeches about compassion while cutting off your own father? Talking about mental health while supposedly making your sister-in-law cry? Preaching about privacy while selling stories about your private life to the highest bidder? Come on. The hypocrisy is staggering. My father sold stories about me to the tabloids, Meghan said defensively. And you've been selling stories about everyone else ever since, Bill replied. The difference is, you're making millions doing it and acting like you're some kind of hero. Meghan took a step toward his desk. You are a horrible, horrible person. You have no empathy, no understanding, no compassion. I have plenty of compassion, Bill said, for people who actually deserve it, for people who are genuinely struggling, not for millionaires who play dress-up as activists. That's it, Meghan said. I'm leaving. This interview is over. Fine, leave, Bill said, waving his hand dismissively. Run away like you always do. I'm sure you'll go straight to your media friends and tell them how you were attacked and victimized yet again. Add it to the list. Meghan stood there for a moment, her chest heaving, clearly trying to think of a comeback. The audience was dead quiet, everyone staring, waiting to see what would happen next. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was ice cold. You're going to regret this. Do you know who I am? Do you understand the kind of influence I have? Bill actually laughed at that. Is that a threat? Are you threatening me on my own show? This is amazing. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle criticism, so you immediately jump to threats and intimidation. It's not a threat, Meghan said. It's a fact. I have millions of supporters who will hear about how I was treated here tonight. Great, Bill said. Tell them. Put it on Instagram. Make it into a podcast episode. I don't care. The truth is the truth, and the truth is that you came on this show expecting to be coddled and praised, and when you got actual questions instead, you couldn't handle it. Actual questions? Meghan said, her voice getting shrill. You've done nothing but attack me from the moment I sat down. I've asked you to account for your own behavior, Bill corrected. If that feels like an attack to you, maybe that says more about you than it does about me. Meghan looked at the audience, as if expecting them to jump to her defense. A few people looked sympathetic, but most just looked uncomfortable. Nobody was cheering for her. She turned back to Bill. You know what? You're not worth my time. You're not worth anyone's time. This show is garbage, you're garbage, and everyone who watches this garbage is garbage. The audience gasped again. Someone in the back yelled something that couldn't quite be made out. Bill's eyebrows shot up. Wow, so now you're insulting my audience too? These people took time out of their lives to come sit in this studio, and you're calling them garbage because they're not mindlessly supporting you? They're sitting here watching you bully a woman and doing nothing about it, Meghan said. They're sitting here watching two adults have a disagreement, Bill said. That's called discourse. That's called democracy. Just because someone disagrees with you doesn't mean they're bullying you. You have been bullying me this entire time, Meghan insisted. I've been challenging you, Bill said. There's a difference. But in your world, challenge equals bullying. Criticism equals racism. Disagreement equals misogyny. You've created this perfect little bubble where anyone who doesn't worship you is automatically a bad person. And that's not how the real world works. Meghan's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. You don't know anything about the real world. You live in your little Hollywood bubble, surrounded by yes men, thinking you're so smart and so important. That's rich coming from someone who lives in Montecito and hangs out with Oprah, Bill shot back. At least Oprah is a good person who lifts people up instead of tearing them down, Meghan said. Oprah is a billionaire who makes money off of people's trauma, including yours, Bill replied. She's not your friend, she's your employer. She paid you to tell your story because she knew it would get ratings. That's called business, not friendship. Meghan looked like she might actually explode. Her face was red, her jaw was clenched, and her whole body was rigid with anger. I need to leave before I say something I'll really regret, she said through gritted teeth. Too late, Bill said with a grin. You already called everyone here garbage. I think that ship has sailed. Meghan grabbed her phone from the chair and started walking toward the exit, but then she stopped and turned around one more time. You know what I regret? She said. I regret coming here. I regret thinking that maybe, just maybe, you had evolved into someone capable of having a mature, respectful conversation. But you haven't. You're still the same shock jock you've always been, desperate for attention, willing to hurt people to get it. And you're still the same fame-hungry social climber you've always been, Bill replied without missing a beat. Desperate to be loved, willing to throw anyone under the bus to get it. Your family, your in-laws, your husband's family, anyone who gets in the way of your narrative. My narrative is the truth, Meghan said. Your narrative is whatever you need it to be in any given moment, Bill said. That's why your stories keep changing. That's why the details never quite add up. That's why people who actually know you keep contradicting what you say. Those people are lying, Meghan said quickly. Everyone's lying except you, right? Bill said. Your dad's lying. Your sister's lying. The palace staff is lying. The British press is lying. The American press is lying. Everyone is lying except for poor, innocent, perfect Meghan. Do you hear how insane that sounds? What sounds insane is you sitting here gaslighting me on national television, Meghan said. Gaslighting, Bill repeated. That's another word you people love to throw around without actually knowing what it means. Gaslighting would be me trying to make you question your own reality. I'm not doing that. I'm questioning your version of events because your version doesn't match up with anyone else's version. That's not gaslighting. That's just calling out inconsistencies. I don't have to stand here and listen to this, Meghan said, turning toward the exit again. Then don't, Bill called after her. Go ahead and leave. Prove my point. Show everyone watching that you can't handle even the slightest bit of pushback. Meghan spun around one last time. You want to know why I can't handle it? Because I've been dealing with it for years. Years of constant attacks, constant criticism, constant harassment. And now I'm supposed to just sit here and smile while you add to it? You've been dealing with criticism that comes with being in the public eye, Bill said. Welcome to fame. It's not all photo shoots and designer clothes. Sometimes people ask you tough questions. Sometimes people disagree with you. That's part of the deal. I didn't ask for any of this, Meghan said. And for the first time, her voice cracked a little. Yes, you did, Bill said. But his tone was slightly softer now. You absolutely did. You dated a prince knowing full well what that would mean. You married into the most famous family in the world. You could have stayed private. You could have lived a quiet life. But you didn't want that. You wanted the fame and the platform and the influence. You just didn't want the scrutiny that comes with it. Meghan wiped at her eyes quickly. You have no idea what it's like. You're right, I don't, Bill admitted. But I know what it's like to be criticized. I know what it's like to have people hate you for your opinions. And I deal with it by having thicker skin and not expecting everyone to agree with me. Well, congratulations on your thick skin, Meghan said sarcastically. Not everyone is built like you. Clearly, Bill said. They stared at each other for a long moment. The audience was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Finally, Meghan shook her head. I'm done. I'm really done this time. Okay, Bill said simply. Meghan started walking toward the exit, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. She got about halfway there when Bill called out one more time. Hey, Meghan? She stopped, but didn't turn around. For what it's worth, Bill said, I actually do hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I just don't think you're going to find it by constantly playing the victim. Meghan stood there for a second, her back still to him. Then, without saying another word, she walked off the stage and disappeared through the exit. The audience sat in stunned silence for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. Then someone else joined in. Within seconds, half the audience was applauding, while the other half sat looking uncomfortable. Bill looked at the camera and shrugged. Well, that was fun. We'll be right back after this break. If we still have a show after that. The studio erupted into nervous laughter as they cut to commercial. The whole thing had lasted less than 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Bill sat there behind his desk, looking at the empty chair across from him where Meghan had been sitting just moments before. One of the producers ran out onto the stage, looking panicked. Is she really gone? Bill nodded. Oh yeah, she's gone. Should we go after her? The producer asked. And say what? Bill replied. Come back so I can ask you more questions you don't want to answer? The producer ran his hands through his hair, clearly stressed. This is going to be everywhere by tomorrow morning. Probably, Bill agreed. But we got good television out of it, right? The producer didn't look convinced, but he nodded and headed back off stage. Bill looked at the audience, who were all still buzzing with conversation and shocked expressions. So, he said, breaking the tension, anyone else want to come up here and storm off my set? We've got about 20 minutes of show left to fill. A few people laughed. Most people just looked stunned. Behind the scenes, staff members were already on their phones, probably texting friends and family about what they'd just witnessed. Security was at the exit, making sure Meghan actually left the building. The whole place was in controlled chaos. When they came back from commercial, Bill addressed what had happened head on. So, as you all just saw, our guest decided that she'd had enough of actual conversation and decided to leave, which is her right. I'm not going to sit here and trash her more than I already did. But I do want to say this. We live in a time where people think they should only have to answer questions they like, only have to hear opinions they agree with. And when someone challenges them, they act like it's the worst thing that's ever happened to them. That's not healthy. That's not how society works. We have to be able to disagree with each other without it turning into World War III. The audience applauded at that, more enthusiastically this time. Bill continued. Look, I don't hate Meghan Markle. I don't even dislike her. I just think she's wrong about a lot of things, and I think she's handling her situation poorly. And I'm allowed to think that, just like she's allowed to think I'm a horrible person. That's how this works. We have different opinions. The difference is, I'm willing to sit here and defend my opinions, and she wasn't. More applause? Anyway, Bill said, moving on, we've got some other guests coming up, and hopefully they'll stick around for the whole interview. We'll be right back. As they cut to another commercial, Bill took a sip of his water and shook his head. In all his years of doing television, he'd had people walk off before, but never quite like that. Never with that level of drama and anger and entitlement. His other guests that night were much more subdued, probably afraid of setting him off after what they'd just witnessed. The rest of the show went smoothly, but everyone knew that wasn't what people would be talking about the next day. When the show ended and the audience filed out, they were all still talking about the Meghan incident. Some people thought Bill had been too harsh. Others thought he'd been exactly right. But everyone agreed it had been incredible television. Bill stayed behind for a few minutes, doing his usual post-show routine. When someone asked him if he thought Meghan would sue or make a big public statement about what happened, he just shrugged. She'll do whatever she's going to do, he said. I said what I said. I meant what I said, and I'd say it all again. And that was that. The interview that was supposed to be a friendly chat between a host and a celebrity guest had turned into one of the most dramatic moments in talk show history. All because someone asked questions that the guest didn't want to answer. All because someone refused to just nod along and agree with everything being said. The empty chair sat there under the bright lights, a reminder of what happens when entitlement meets reality. When someone who's used to being praised and protected suddenly faces actual scrutiny. When the bubble finally pops. Bill looked at that chair one more time before heading to his dressing room. Tomorrow, everyone would have an opinion about what happened.